The Natural News Store is now open. Hi, this is Joni Cox with Homegrown Health with some great news for your health and your budget. Visit shopnaturalnews.com to start saving money right now on superfoods like cacao, camu, and acai. You'll find coconut flour, coconut sugar, and hemp seeds, as well as detox products like Zeotrex, Oxy powder, and nascent iodine. You'll also find survival organic food supplies and colloidal silver. Both can help you prepare for natural disasters or other events that might threaten your health or safety. As Hurricane Sandy recently taught America, just one storm can knock out the power grid and leave us all scrambling for food and medicine. We've also got amazing herbal medicine cabinets and herbal survival kits. Plus, we're the exclusive source for the all-new Natural Attitude Turmeric Extract. It's a powerful, alcohol-free, liquid form of turmeric with high absorbability. Plus, get free shipping in the USA on orders of $99 or more. A portion of all sales helps fund health freedom and food freedom initiatives. Find all this and much more at shopnaturalnews.com. That's shopnaturalnews.com.
You're listening to The Pursuit of Freedom on naturalnewsradio.com.
Gerald Celente founded the TrendsResearchInstitute in 1980. He's a pioneer trend strategist. He's an author of national bestseller Trends 2000, Trends Tracking, Far Better Than Megatrends, and publisher of the internationally circulated TrendsJournal newsletter. But what really counts is the amazing accuracy that Gerald's methods have been able to foresee major economic changes and the social consequences of them. It's an honor to welcome you to Pursuit of Freedom.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Phil.
There seems to be an avalanche of significant events that have major implications, so much so it seems to be overwhelming most Americans. You have consistently predicted that the federal government and the world's economy is literally on the verge of collapse. Are these events foreshadowing that this is coming up?
Well, again, what we're looking at, you know how they say that history repeats itself? Well, it's repeating itself. We've seen this before, but it's never exactly the same. And when you go back to the crash of 1929, it was followed by the Great Depression. And then, of course, there were currency wars, trade wars, and world wars. It's really no different now. We had the Panic of '08, and then we have a Great Depression. There's a Great Depression going on. You live in Greece, there's a Great Depression. You live in Spain, it's a Great Depression. They don't call them depressions, not with 28, 30% unemployment. Remember, at the height of the Depression in the U.S. officially, it was 22%. They call it recession. And in the United States, when you look at John Williams' shadow stats, we were in a depression. You know, they're cooking the numbers. Once you go off the unemployment rolls, you're no longer counted as unemployed. And then you keep looking around. And you go to Ireland, you go to Portugal. Look what's going on in Italy. So around the world, Hungary, Slovenia, one country after another, Romania, Bulgaria, there's depression, there's currency wars. They're devaluing the currency in front of our eyes. I'm not saying it's a currency war. I'm not the only one. Guido Montega, the finance minister from Brazil, he calls it a currency war. Mervyn King, the outgoing head of the Bank of England, the currency war going on. Oh, and then you have Axel Verber, the head of UBS and former head of Deutsche Bank. There's a currency war. And then you can see the real currency war unfolding with the new prime minister of Japan, Abe. They've lowered interest rates now so low, they've flooded so much money into the Japanese economy that the yen has lost some about 30% of its value since September. So against the dollar. And then you go back to the 1930s when you had the Depression, currency wars, trade wars, World War. The Japanese lowered the value of their currency 40% against the dollar and 60% against the pound sterling. So, and they're doing this, and all the countries are doing it for two reasons. All the cheap money keeps the Ponzi scheme going. They're just dumping dough in. They're printing the stuff. And it also allows them to sell their junk overseas at lower rates. Because if your currency is cheaper than somebody else's currency, you could sell more of your exports. And then World War. Well, we're looking at a world war going on. There's a war in Syria, a war in Libya. There's a war in Yemen. There's a war in Bahrain. They don't call them wars. How about a nice name like an Arab Spring in Egypt or Tunisia? And there are class warfares going on in Spain with the indignados. In Greece, there's a riot and a demonstration every other week. And again, throughout the world, we're seeing the upheavals beginning at both social and geopolitical levels. And as we speak, the wise leaders, the psychopaths from Germany, from England, from France, throughout Europe have now announced they're going to arm those Syrian rebels. Oh, yeah, the Syrian rebels, the same kind of rebels that they armed over there in Libya, the Islamist fundamentalists, the al-Nusra group. There's Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, all these Als, wonderful cats. So you can see the war is heating up, and you can see where it's heading.
The key to all of this is everybody's following the same game plan. They're all engaging in hyper-Keynesianism. Do these people have any memory at all of Weimar Germany and what happened? That's what's in store, I believe.
That's part of it. And the other part, again, is you asked me, do they have any idea? The psychopaths have any idea of sanity? The sociopaths have any idea of mental illness? That's what people don't want to call these people who they are. They won't call them by their real names. Look what's going on with this guy, John Insane McCain, who Americans call a war hero. He spent Memorial Day with the so-called Syrian rebels and saying that we're going to arm them. He's not a war hero. I want to make this really straight. This guy's a war criminal. He was bombing innocent people in Vietnam. And his plane got shot down. That doesn't make you a hero. It makes you a loser. And by the way, he crashed his plane a couple of times on the aircraft carrier, and the only reason they didn't wash him out was because his old man was an admiral. And everybody bows to these clowns. When are people going to stop? You can see, look where they're taking us. The Americans haven't won a war since World War II. Let's get this straight. They lost in Korea, they lost in Vietnam, they lost in Afghanistan, they lost in Iraq, they blew apart Libya, and now they're going into Syria? And then you're talking about the economy? They pumped how many tens of trillions of dollars into this already? And the only reasons it's staying afloat is because of record low interest rates and pumping digital dollars, not worth the paper they're not printed on, into this system.
That dumping into the system has created a vicious cycle they can't get out of. They need to raise interest rates like Paul Volcker did back in the 80s, but it will tank the economy. What Volcker did was, in fact, the right thing to do in order to save the dollar. But the problems are far more severe now, aren't they?
You got it. You both on both points. What Volcker did, I remember what Volcker did because I was trading gold back then. And gold took a whack, like it is now, but for different reasons. That's also another thing. When they raised interest rates went to 22-year high, to 22% on home mortgages. And they put a dead end to the economy to stop the inflation. And it worked. And it also crashed gold. But now, of course, gold is going down for a very different reason, and that is they're shorting it on the paper markets, and the central banks don't have it in their interest to see gold prices rise, because if gold prices skyrocket the way they should be, then people will be bailing out of their worthless crap currencies that they keep printing. So it's a very different time. People don't realize it. Back in the 80s, there was no China, to speak of. China, who cared about China? All people knew about China was Mao Zedong. I think he was dead by then. And then India, who cared about India? It was nowhere. And there was no globalization. The point I'm making is that Russia, everything east of Berlin was behind the Iron Curtain. So the difference is now you have a global economy. And the gold markets back then and silver markets were very tightly manipulated by just the Americans. The Hunt brothers actually cornered the whole silver market. So no matter what the central banks do and the other money schemers do to drive down the price of gold, my belief is it's only going to be temporary, so I'm in it for the long haul.
That answers a question that I was going to follow up with, that you believe that the trend for gold, does that apply to silver as well? Do you think that's on the same type of trajectory, that it's being suppressed?
I'm more bullish about gold because, silver has to do also with industrial production. And again, I don't make a claim to, where it's going to go in relationship to, but it will mirror it. To some extent, where gold is, gold has been around as the precious metal since the beginning of civilization, recorded civilization. And despite what Ben Bernanke, or as I like to call him, Osama Ben Bernanke, America's public enemy #1, who's ruined this economy by dumping all these trillions in and devaluing our future, he says it's not currency. We should tell the Iranians that because they're trading oil for gold. So somebody should wake them up. No, gold, I think, is going to be much stronger. And as I said, this is a very different time. I mentioned I was trading gold. I bought gold, just for the record, on January 20th, 1980, when the day it crashed. And I bought it at the height of its trading point during the day. So I remember what it felt like. And then there's this kind of emotion that's going on today is totally different because, as you well know, physical demand for gold is still very strong. That wasn't the case back then. And so and if anybody doesn't think gold is not being manipulated, then they must have attention deficit disorder because they forgot about possibly the LIBOR rates being rigged. How about the bond market? It's being rigged in front of our eyes. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Japanese Bank of Japan, they're all rigging the bond market by, in the United States, they're buying, $85 billion a month of mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. So it's a rigged market. And I believe they're rigging gold as well.
Now, doesn't the manipulation of the currency apply to Wall Street in that we're seeing lots of numbers piling up on the boards, but this is devalued money, and it's also, isn't it the money slushing around that the Fed is kind of dumped out there, but it's really not an indicator of real economic action?
Well, no, I would say it is an indicator of real economic action because the action is happening. You're seeing, for example, housing prices rebounding to 2003 levels. You're seeing the price of homes going up year to date almost 11%. So it's having a real economic effect. But it's like giving someone that's suffering a chronic degenerative disease an allotropic drug. It's not a curative. It only relieves the symptoms. So the symptoms are being relieved, but it's not going to cure the disease.
I think there's so many distortions, and a lot of it is just the devaluation of the dollar and how it's causing the ripple effect throughout the entire economy, creating all kinds of problems. And, of course, it's going to create a great deal of social upheaval as well. The government's response to the anticipated civil disorder has been to take away many of our essential freedoms. This leads me to my next question. Adam Kokesh is calling for a nonviolent revolution, if it's at all possible. But he does not rule out the possibility of armed conflict. The goal is to dissolve the federal government. Is Adam Kokesh the leader of a new trend in political action?
You know, not for nothing. I mean, I've been calling for the Second American Revolution now for going on, let's see, it's 2013, 4 years. You know, and matter of fact, if anybody's been following me, I bought the most historic corner in the United States to launch it from. It's the only place on each corner where there's a stone building that predates the Revolutionary War up here in colonial Kingston, which is about an hour and 45 minutes north of New York City. I mean, I was on Russia Today back in 2008, you know, talking about the Second American Revolution. I've been writing about it for years. And, of course, I've been calling for a peaceful revolution. And I totally disagree with Adam in the sense that if it has to turn violent, then so be it. Because all you have to see is where violence gets us. It only brings more of it. And if anybody thinks that they're going to beat the United States military and the military police and what has happened with the abrogation of our rights and the repeal of the Posse Comitatus Act by President Obama on New Year's Eve 2011, where it now allows the military to take over police duties, you know, they're singing a different tune than I am. I totally believe in a nonviolent Second American Revolution, and I believe we're on the. It hasn't happened yet, but it can well happen, and I'm very much pushing for it and doing everything I can to restore the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights.
Adam has definitely gained a following among the younger generation. The 20-somethings are a big part of the Ron Paul revolution. Speaking of the younger generation, I have a co-host who's visiting from college, my daughter, Tasha. She is pursuing a unique career in medicine. I'll let her explain her goal of practicing a hybrid form of medicine. And she has a question about her career choice. Go ahead, Tasha.
I'm pursuing a degree in a DO, which is a doctor of osteopathy. I am hoping to blend alternative, or what's now considered alternative medicine, with the best of the modern medicine we have today. And I don't know if you're familiar with the DO. They learn the same thing as an MD, but they also include what's called manual manipulation, where they would align the spine, align the joints, in order to help treat and cure common ailments. But my question to you, as someone who's an expert in trends, do you see a trend towards alternative medicine, given some of the failures that we see in modern medicine?
Tasha, I have an honorary doctorate in complementary medicine from the National University of Health Sciences. And one of the first books I worked on back in the mid-1980s was Natural Healing. And I also coined the term clean food back in, I think it was 1992. And so I'm very familiar with the field. And as a matter of fact, we're in the new upcoming TrendsJournal, a big focus of it's going to be what I've been terming whole health healing trend. And yes, there's going to be a great future in it. But in understanding it, it's also important to understand not only the obstacles that are going to be put in front by the establishment, whether it's, you see the same obstacles, whether it's in the military, trying to stop it, whether it's trying to stop environmental poisonings, the, GMOs, the pesticides, the bovine growth hormones, and on and on. There's always the obstacles. And it's also important to understand what America is and who are the people that participate in alternative or complementary healing. America's the first, second, and third world nation. The people that gravitate toward the alternatives. So there is a surge, for example, in massage therapists and yoga centers and organic food and the broad range of alternative healthcare options. But again, in looking at it, it's look at the gap between the rich and the poor in the United States. It's the widest than of any of the industrialized nations. So you can see who's going to embrace what you're doing. The proof is in the population. And you don't need voluminous studies or a basket of statistics to look at what the nation looks like. All you have to do is open your eyes, and before you will see a nation that's been fattened up on fast food, junk food, hormone-enhanced, genetically modified, artificially flavored, colored, corn syrup, sweetened, processed food nation. And you can see what they look like. Look, when I was a young guy, there were never people in supermarkets in extra wide aisles on these electric carts because they're too fat to walk. This is new. When I was a kid, there were a couple of chubby kids in school, and now the norm ranges between overweight and obese. And this is a society where the government says that pizza is a vegetable because it has tomato sauce on it, and the sauce is made from tomatoes, therefore it's a vegetable. I mean, who can make this stuff up? So yes, what you're going to be going in is a growing trend. There's going to be great opportunities, but there's also going to be obstacles. It won't be easy street. I mentioned to you that the first book I worked on was called Natural Healing. And what happened was, back in the late 70s, I was married for quite a long time. I'm divorced quite a long time. But my ex-wife had colitis. And they wanted to give her that operation where, they remove her colon, her anus, and other parts of her rectum, and put a pouch in. And she was all of 30 years old. Yeah. And then remember, this is the late 70s, right? There was no such thing as the things that we're talking about now that are so commonplace. Acupuncture was illegal back then. I'm not kidding. So anyway, I went on, we moved back from Chicago. I'm originally from the East Coast, and you might be able to tell by my accent. And we moved back east, and we moved north of New York City, and someone introduced us to a chiropractor. And talk about spinal manipulation. And back then, chiropractors were really the only doctors that were treating alternatively. And we found this doctor that really changed her life and mine. And it began with the diet. And I'll never forget, he said the word doctor means teacher and educator. And I'm going to teach you how to take care of yourself. And she became totally cured. Remember, this is after going through a whole series. Oh, by the way, this one doctor, he convinced her to have a laparoscopy to see if there was any other things that were causing these flare-ups of colitis. And it was going to be a nothing little operation to which she almost died. They screwed up the operation. So I'm very familiar with the field. And again, remember now in the 70s and 80s, mind you, the medical profession, as reactionary and prescription drug dependent as it is today, was in the dark ages when it came to complementary medicine and alternative healing. So I believe you're on the right path. I think it's great what you're doing, and it is the future. It's the future for the aware and the awake.
Thank you, sir.
That was encouraging to hear. Gerald, for people who want to find out more about your work, can you share your website, also other resources you suggest for information to be prepared for the chaos ahead?
Well, the only resource that shows you history before it happens, the TrendsJournal. And I'm not saying it because I'm the publisher. I'm saying it because there's nothing else like it in the world. Nothing comes close. I mean, you pick up today's paper, you read yesterday's news, that'll tell you what will happen last year. They're never looking ahead. And name me one university that has a trend forecasting curriculum. Could you imagine, here we are in the 21st century, and the future's still off limits. But boy, all those graduates they're pumping out that are history majors. Hey, great, man. That'll get you far. So no, there's nothing else like it. But the future's not going to change until the people change. And the way you change is by what you're doing. And that is to be healthy spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And when you have your own life in order, the future opens up to you in a very different way. You're unencumbered by fear and you have courage and you have respect for yourself and dignity. Look what the society looks like. They dress, as we used to say, as a kid growing up, they look like carphones, I mean, they dress like pigs. Their pants hanging down, people that become so slovenly. So you're going to have respect you don't have your self-respect. So nothing changes until the individual changes. And, what you're doing is really all what it's about.
I encourage the show's listeners to check out the valuable information provided by TrendsJournal. I wish you continued success, Gerald, in all your efforts.
Well, thank you for having me, and the best of luck, Tasha.
Thank you, sir.
The pursuit of